The brothers Wisp. The brothers Wisp, brothers Wisp. The brothers Wisp. The brothers.
You're now listening to Greg. It's the Brothers Wisp.
Hey everybody, this is Greg of the Brothers Wisp, number 161. While I'm saying that, I'm double checking my levels because honestly I forgot to do that ahead of time. Anyway, coming from the great state of Texas here in America, because that's how we pronounce it down here, because it's, it's a different country down here. But today we have with us, they're both sort of from Chicagoland-ish, we'll say, but we have Tommy from closer to Chicagoland.
Yep. Hello. How's it going, everyone?
And then we have Nick, who's further from Chicagoland.
Yeah, that's true.
Does it still count? Same state, right? So,
I mean, anyone outside of Illinois, if you tell them you're from Illinois, they're like, oh, you're from Chicago. Like, sure.
Is that only applicable like if you live in Rhode Island? You're practically from every city in Rhode Island?
Could be.
And seeing as I've been in, like, the county I was born in was in Colorado, was larger than the state of Rhode Island. You could actually play, I think you could fit like 4 of them was what we looked at when we were in school. I was just like, everywhere is
Tommy, I don't know if you know this, but it's not the size of the state. It's how you use it.
Well, you know what? It may be the motion of the ocean, but you aren't going to get to England in a rowboat.
I don't know. Isn't Rhode Island actually touch the ocean?
It does.
All right. See,
Yes.
You're landlocked, so suck it. Anyway.
Yeah, I guess we know nothing.
All right. Well, let's get the vegetables out of the way so we can get to the dessert. We have a couple of new patrons this go around, and that's people that went to patreon.com/brotherswisp, chucked a couple of bones, and I'm fairly certain these are both because of Tommy anyway. But we have Jeremy Allen. He's our new redneck from Arkansas. And we have John Schaff. I can't recall where he's from, but he's somewhere. And so we thank you, patrons. So they're going to be in the patron-only Slack, chopping it up, sharing information, and learning stuff at the same time. We also have our 2 faithful sponsors. So we are brought to you by Sonar, a scalable, intuitive, and comprehensive ISP billing and operational support system. You can learn more about them at Sonar.Software. We also have towercoverage.com. So Tower Coverage is your RF propagation system to empower your network, real-time data metrics, enable your coverage area, reaching your customer base, and more. The industry's best RF propagation mapping system allows website integration for customer sign-up and pre-qualification. Use this data to scientifically plan expansion and help your WISP succeed. Get a free trial today at towercoverage.com. So I specifically made sure not to make the word scientifically sound crazy, because I always make it sound crazy. So there, that was for everybody out there who goes bonkers. And I won't say clicking stop now at the end, just for Tommy. Of course, I just said it right there. So I don't know. Anyway, I digress.
With the bases.
There is some interesting stuff. I told Nick that this was a special one, but I didn't tell him why it was special. And I'm sure all of you have read the little description at the top, so you probably know why this one is special. It's because I'm retiring from the Brothers Wisp podcast. So this is going to be my last official. I'm looking at Nick's face, and there's no reaction. Oh, man, I'm so disappointed. This is going to be my last official one. So I've been thinking about it. I put some notes together, and there is a myriad of reasons. So one is I really haven't been in the WISP industry for a number of years, and I haven't been doing that stuff really that actively. I do still use a lot of MikroTik stuff in my networks and in my MDU stuff, but it's not really like WISP, right? And so honestly, I do mostly enterprise automation these days, and I think probably almost nobody listening to this does, other than maybe Zach. So I don't know how applicable that information is to most of you listeners out there, but I've also been doing a lot of travel recently, and for a little while there, it was like a week gone, a week back, week gone, and to be honest, like those Saturdays where I would do the podcast, it's like a good chunk of my time kind of subtracted from me, and so we can't go anywhere, we got to stay here so I could do all this stuff, and It's kind of been cutting into my precious family time there a little bit. So that one's sort of been kind of to the front of my mind. And so it's been kind of this this decision to make, right? It's between like just shuttering the podcast, and we had a good run, just over 10 years at this point, or I could look to hand it off. And so the decision was obviously not made by me. It was, all predicated on, can I hand it off to somebody? And that somebody is T-Cent, Tommy Krogan, right here. He's going to be taking over. And honestly, I couldn't think of anybody better, and it's for a myriad of reasons, and I thought I would lay them out. One is he is neck deep in the industry, and he has been for a long time. Two, he's passionate about this stuff and learning new stuff about it and educating others, helping others. Obviously, everybody in the Slack has been helped by Tommy, but he's also super active on all these forums and all this stuff. He's crazy. He's a giver, right? He's also, quite frankly, he's got the talent. So I've heard him lead conversations. I've heard him have amazing interactions. So he's got it, and this is going to be an opportunity for Tommy to grow in a lot of new and interesting ways, become better at all the stuff he already does, and maybe find some new stuff. And I think probably the most important one is when I asked him, he said yes. So, very, very important reason. But I'm here to help Tommy in whatever capacity I can as we transition. But Tommy is going to be the voice of the new generation, right? He's your brand new Pepsi. He's going to be taking the podcast in new and creative avenues. New things are going to be happening, which I think is amazing. So I don't know about you guys, but I am truly excited to see what he does with this. So really, I want to thank every guest that's ever been on this podcast, right? Enriching it, make it amazing. Everybody who's been, a co-host here. Can't thank you guys enough. Like, I truly appreciate the gift of your time, because it's kind of the most precious limited resource that I've found, at least in my experience. And a big thank you to the listeners and the patrons. Like, this wouldn't have kept going. It wouldn't exist without you either, right? It's that whole tree falls in a wood. I guess if somebody records a podcast and nobody's there to hear it, did it really happen? But also, this podcast has really been a safe space for me for a long time to explore new ideas and ask dumb questions without judgment. And you guys were amazing to help out and answer along the way. But also, this podcast was a big part, and this community was a big part of what got me through, the Panty D. It was a tough time for a lot of people, and man, I was like super isolated, and I didn't realize how much I required other humans, but you guys were definitely like a lifeline, kind of a tether, keeping me attached to reality, and I can't thank you enough. So on that note, the floor and subsequently the podcast is yours, Tommy. So take it away, brother.
Thanks, Greg. So I guess for me, I get the benefit of having a response right off the bat, because I've been able to think about this for a little while and reflect and like think about, like, holy cow, like, to be honest, I am where I'm at now because of the Brothers Wisp. And most of what I know is from your work here, creating the podcast, creating the Slack group. BGP, I would never have been able to figure out getting BGP running. Well, I might have, but it would take a hell of a lot longer without your BGP lab and being able to feed a full feed into my CCR 2011 and crash that, like, just hands down. That'll be a memory. It's like it would just crash, and then I would get like a minute, and I'd be like, okay, what's going on? Why is it? And then crash, and then crash. It was really, really hilarious. So yeah, it's been this group has been an amazing opportunity for me. It's one reason why I send a lot of people to the group, because honestly, most of what I know comes from interactions inside of this group and that were freely given to me. A guy who has a philosophy degree, which is not very useful in this business. Just FYI, kids, don't get one of those. I got it through no fault of my own, but I was able to go from a lowly WISP installer out in the middle of nowhere with no friends and no one to interact with who was into networking and did this stuff. And you provided that group and resource that I would not have had anything else. I would have had Facebook groups, and wow, those are a great resource and real inspiring for everyone and as newbies in the industry. We've gotten a lot better, but there's been it's what you've built here. I'm excited to be more involved with, and I'm looking forward to ruling with my iron fist and eliminating all the people who I disagree with in the group. There will be swift and violent recourse to everyone who has disagreed with me ever, and I have a list of your names. I can't even think of the last person I disagreed with in the group.
Amazing. I don't know,
Facebook
man.
groups, yes, I disagree with a lot of people, but
so many people come in and spread their wings and fly, and it's such it was such an amazing opportunity, right? Like I saw both of you guys come in early in your careers and really take off, and it's been truly one of like the great pleasures in my life is to see you guys grow and become more. And so happy that I don't know, it became like I don't know, like a hitching post, right? Or I don't know, just you could hang out and so many interesting people would sort of enter your life. I think it's really awesome. And Tommy said he's kind enough to let me hang out in the Slack still, so he's not going to boot me out. Of course, that iron fist, it might come down.
He will have to be at the $8 a month Patreon,
which is fine. Yeah, it's cool, and I definitely want to stay part of the community. I just couldn't be more excited to like see like new life and energy come in. So it's gonna be awesome.
Cool. So, well, Nick, if you weren't surprised at all, and you're blowing me away at like no shock. Like I was suspecting something, but I guess maybe you interact with Greg more often than I do.
A little bit. Yeah.
So, well, good. So, yeah, it is a changing of the chapters, but that said, the chapters do go on, and we have all sorts of insanity. I want to skip over the microtik stuff really quick, and just like because it's been the huge conversation topic of everyone. There's a new broadband funding called BEAD, BEAD. It's through NTIA, and they just released their what they're looking to do, what some of the requirements in general are going to be, speed stuff, basically their notice of funding opportunity, and how is all this going to work out, the 10,000-foot view. And the big point that's gotten all the WISPs really annoyed is that in there they have a requirement that for you to not be overbuilt, or like you need to provide reliable broadband service. And the term reliable broadband service means broadband service that the broadband data maps show is accessible to a location via fiber optic technology, cable modem, hybrid fiber coax technology, digital subscriber line DSL technology. You can use terrestrial fixed wireless technology using entirely licensed spectrum or using a hybrid of licensed and unlicensed spectrum. There definitely hasn't been a lot of qualifications clarifications as to what hybrid means. And, does a backhaul into a 5 gigahertz access point, licensed backhaul into point of presence that has 5 gigahertz, does that count? A lot of people in the past have said that would kind of count, but from the sounds of it, people are saying that that's not going to be the case, and that has a lot of people really up in arms, because there's plenty of guys who claim that there's providing 100 meg service on wireless. I've done it. Admittedly, most of the places I was really, really rural, and so it's just really hard to get the signal to noise ratio when you're shooting 5-6 miles, and not having to spend $600-700 on radio antenna and all that other stuff, and a decent mount, because your bigger antenna, you have to get better mount, all that stuff. So we just didn't have a lot of opportunities, but I know that there was a few times where I was able to test over 100 megs, but it was it's never been an opportunity for me, just because I was always too rural, and we just didn't have, it just wasn't in the cards for us to be selling that. So I know that there's a lot of guys out there that don't do it, but I know that there's plenty of people that do, and plenty of manufacturers that claim that they sell it. What about you guys that,
stands out to me there is the idea that they're talking about, that they want you to be licensed spectrum, and yet they aren't opening up any frequencies to be licensed. You know what I mean? That like are truly used. Yeah, stuff that's truly used for distributing to end users, and the stuff that they do have is like almost impossible to get a hold of, right?
Well, I mean, CBRS kind of counts, and you can get 20-40 megahertz in a lot of places, or if you were in a small county, there's plenty of guys that were able to get spectrum, and to have a what's called a PAL, which means that they have up to 40 megahertz of dedicated spectrum that they can use, and you can break 100 megs on a customer over 40 megahertz. That's pretty easy to do. I know the Cambia Medusa that they've talked about being able to do several hundred, so you can do that. It's definitely possible. I mean, the Tirana guys, all of them are like, whoa, look how much. So I think the big issue is that the unlicensed guys, and it's really like, yeah, sure, CBRS was it wasn't great for a lot of guys. There's plenty of opportunity there, is what I think a lot of the thought is, and it's just moving away from the unlicensed frequency only guys. Is I feel like it's where they're going.
Well, I like how they have DSL on the list. When was the last time you were reliably able to get more than like 5 or 10 megs off a DSL line?
Right now, I have well, technically I have 2 connections. I have I tried. I looked in multiple different forums. I tried to find a WISP at my new place and couldn't get one that would. I'm just surrounded by trees, but I'm in the middle of town, and I'm like a block and a half away from the Frontier building, so I can get 90 megs off of that all day long.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, yeah, if you're close to the one of the CEOs of the pops, I guess you're pretty solid there.
But yeah, I was just working on a customer the other day. It was either Tuesday or last week, where we're stuck at 5 megs, 30 megs. Actually, yeah, we were just talking in a meeting about a customer that was 30 meg service on DSL, and that's the best that we can do. It's like, God. So it just blows my mind sometimes. But piece of copper, it's gonna win out. And well, the copper guys have lots and lots and lots of government money they can use to spend on government decision making. At least that would be the opinion. What do you think, Nick? What do you see? Is the industry going to continue well on the unlicensed spectrum?
I think the stipulation of licensed and hybrid licensed is fair. I think if anybody is today, I don't want to upset anybody, but if you're building a WISP on completely unlicensed spectrum, you're probably not ready for funding. I mean, you have to at least go through the licensing process of like a licensed backhaul to know like, you're looking forward, or you've ran into interference, and that's like something that you struggle with. I think a lot of people who are using completely unlicensed are probably in areas that they don't have a lot of competition, and I think it's fair to have a baseline of people who are already leveraging licensed spectrum to get access to this funding. The hard part right now is that most of the legislators don't understand anything about internet, and they think fiber is where everything's going. And you need to do fiber, you got to do fiber. So the more WISPs that are able to take funding that aren't actually delivering, because I think a lot of people don't understand how difficult it is at scale and multi-point to deliver 100 megabits to the home. It's really not easy until we get these better chipsets out. So there's an opportunity for people to really trash the industry if they are able to get funding but don't actually deliver because they don't necessarily know what they're doing.
Well, I think the industry has gotten, and that's been my argument on the forums, is we have trashed ourselves multiple times.
True.
How many of the mega big WISPs out there have gotten their money, and we're like, well, woo. So I'm not gonna name names or say stuff. It's like, well, we've all been around this long enough that you see these disappointing situations where it's like, everybody loves to bash Comcast or CenturyLink or Frontier or whoever you like, but everybody's done it in some, well, maybe not everybody, but every industry has done it, and it's just like, at least with fiber, when the government buys it, there's fiber in the ground now, and if one guy can't or mismanages it, there, in theory, somebody else can come along and get connection. But the trouble is, I don't think I don't think anybody recognizes the expense of last mile for fiber and getting it to a house, because that is an insane cost. That is,
especially if you do it right.
Then
you actually run conduit to the home, and don't just like direct bury. It is quite expensive. Even if you go really cheap on outsourcing your last mile fiber, it's way more expensive than fixed wireless, which is why fixed wireless is relatively thriving in some parts of the country.
Yeah, there's portions of my old network that doing fiber, there was just no way we could justify ever making money, just because you're not without government funding. And now with government funding, you can cut 40, 50, 60% of that cost, 70% of that cost out. Okay, now it makes, now you break even in 5 years instead of 20. So that's, but even then, that's just a 5-year break even. That's insane. How many investment opportunities have you taken up over the last few years where they're like, we'll break even in 5 years, give us money?
That's the long play, man. The long play.
Yeah, really long play. That's, there's just no winning in that kind of regard, in my opinion. So, and honestly, we just since Agit Pi, was it like 6-7 years ago, his mom needed Wi-Fi or needed internet connectivity, and some WISP got her connectivity out in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. He was the FCC chairman. I remember. So like ever since then, that was like the last like big cool WISP story in like as a group that I can recall. Trying to recall anything else, be like, yeah, hey, look, we've here's an evidence of us being really cool. And WISPA did a little like, hey, these are WISPs who are helping out their communities right after the pandemic, like during the lockdown and stuff. But I think there's just enough inherent bad thoughts about WISP, and then just in general, like too many bad actors that no politician's going to want to hitch their wagon um to us and to our wagon train. I guess that would be the analogy. And so it's like, so it's hard in that regard, I think. But like a lot of guys, I know plenty of the industry, like even the manufacturers, they say if you're building a wireless network and not without the goal of building fiber, like what are you doing? Even the wireless companies, they've got employees that have expressed that to me. And it's like, oh, that's a really interesting thought to be coming from a wireless company, but it makes sense. Like a lot of guys, they start out with wireless and then you build fiber or something else. And I think the end goal, really, the primo technology in this industry is fiber. Is there anything else that would be more primo in anyone's opinion?
Fiber seems like it's most future-proofed. And Nick, I know you've got a lot of experience playing with CMTS systems, and those things are almost like a dark art to keep them up and running, right?
And for a new build, coax is probably more expensive than building fiber. So there is a lot of abandoned cable plants, but there's so much overhead. Like, yeah, glass is great. And I don't think that's going to change, especially from a political standpoint, until the equipment that's available to us leaps as far as technology goes. I think there will be a time when we've got more chains and MIMO and better hardware where you could potentially build a good service, possibly symmetrical, depending on distribution using wireless technologies. We're just not there yet today. And a lot of political figures, they're looking at wanting symmetric speeds everywhere, even though there's a lot of pushback, because even on DOCSIS, the upstream's TDMA still, so you can't get symmetrical speeds on DOCSIS. A lot of GPON systems, same way, you can't really get symmetrical speeds unless you get into the higher end stuff.
Well, that's like saying,
but that's still in their mind. They want 100 by 100. It's like, well, that's hard.
In my head, that's like saying, well, I want your car to be able to go in reverse the same speed it can in drive forward. It's like, what's the point?
They don't understand.
Yeah.
I just want to be the politician that's like, I signed the bill that got broadband, because it's like a huge political motivation.
Yeah. I mean, that said, though, what frustrated me most about my new home connections was like, I have 90 down, but I have like 2.5 to 3 megabits per second up, which is just insane. Yeah, it's like, wow. And then the Comcast one isn't much better, and it's like, geez, what the heck? Like, and a lot of that is where a lot of people's bad internet experiences come out of. Some kid, you don't even have to be doing all that much to kill a 5 megabit connection upload.
Oh yeah.
And then once that's
even
done,
20 or 30 these days.
Yeah, I've got 20, and it murders me when I'm uploading videos and stuff.
Yeah.
So now, and that's one reason why I'm a huge proponent of Cake and FQ Codal and stuff like that, is those dynamic QoS systems, because they handle that and make it so that the experience, initially it was like, oh, well, when you start downloading, that's what everyone thinks about, but upload is where that is killer. That was one reason why at my old company, even though we had slower speeds, we had really happy customers, is we were symmetrical for everything. And it's like, yeah, I can, you want to do whatever? Yeah, I can do that. How much do you want to spend? How little do you want to spend? You can do it on any of my stuff. So it's, and I get it. Like, they're trying to get a little bit of extra money out of somebody who wants to do work from home or be a business and want to sell a residential package to a business that's going to, probably should be spending a little bit more, because they're going to be a higher maintenance cost. So I get it. why the big guys and why a lot of guys do asymmetrical packages. But there's a point wherein asymmetry just is not useful. And you get, on 90 to 3 megabits per second, let's see, that's a 30 to 1 ratio? No, 3 to, let's see.
A lot of that is based on the equipment,
Yeah.
not even just, it's based on the technology. Like they cannot sell symmetrical service, and they're not going to retrofit a huge city of coaxial to fiber unless someone like AT&T is, and then Comcast has to.
Right.
They're just going to let it sit. I mean, they are doing a lot of innovation. I mean, if they were going to go all fiber, they wouldn't be pumping money into these custom cable modems and funding like, DOCSIS 3.1 to get more channels to try to get more capacity, but they're still never going to deliver symmetrical, which is kind of a benefit to the WISP because companies like Comcast will probably also push and lobby against 100 megabit symmetrical service. Because, I've got a gigabit plan at home, but it's like gigabit down or 1.2 down and like 30 up.
Yeah.
They can't deliver symmetrical.
That's crazy asymmetrical. I mean, to me, like a comfortable ratio is 10%. Like I want my upload to at least be 10% of what my download is. And normally that's okay. Well, I mean, I say that. I would really love symmetrical just because I do push so much video, but I think the average consumer is not doing that, right? So I don't know. 10% has always been, like in all of my networks, I've always watched them. And it's generally, my upload is roughly 10% of what my download is. And that is in truly symmetrical networks. Like it generally just sort of always followed that ratio. And so that was always kind of a comfortable margin for me.
Most of my customers, I followed and just looked and see across 1,000 odd customers, and most of the time you were between 8 to 15 to 1 was the download upload ratio. So somewhere in there, 10 to 1 is your number, but like that's just like, well, actually you would have been 9 to 1 at 10%. So, but like just a little bit more, and you can really get the government off everyone's backs. Come on, Comcast. But yeah, no, the technology just isn't able to handle it. So
I think it's a balance of they understand that these companies are doing this, and they want to push companies like Comcast to start doing more fiber. But as a side effect, the WISP industry and the smaller operators are going to suffer because they're scoping legislation and these like funding packages towards those companies. And so it makes it hard for everyone else to compete. So it's like they're kind of banking on those larger, huge corporations to like make the innovation for the customer. And because they don't understand it's a complicated problem. I mean, they've built up the industry, like the whole telecommunications industry for many, many years. And so it's really hard for legislators to understand any of that technology and with all the lobbying. And so it's a really weird landscape right now of wanting to deliver broadband service across the entire country and figuring out how to allocate funds. I mean, states are throwing money, the federal government's throwing money, other organizations are funding it. So like everybody wants, really fast broadband and fiber, but like nobody knows how to actually execute it very well. Because it's hard. It's a big country.
yeah, it's a big country with a lot of people spread out and a lot of people who want to live very rurally.
Yeah. And completely different environments. Like every, 100 miles you go, the environment's like entirely different.
Yeah. In Colorado, you go from mountains to plains to desert. It's like,
See, the money's there, but the hardware's not.
yeah. Yeah. So then it's like, well, okay, I guess we have to run fiber everywhere because that's the only way we're going to keep these people satisfied. And a lot of guys keep throwing a fit about the 100 by 100, or like that the goalpost has moved like 3 or 4 times in the last 3 years. But for the longest time, it was 10-1, I think, was the definition of broadband.
I thought it was like 25 down and something upload for a while.
Yeah, it's 20. It was 25.3 depending on where you were at for and what federal funding you were looking for. for a couple years, but um, I know our first one at my old place 5 years ago, the first one we were at was 10.1. And I was like, really? That's the definition? Wow. Okay. And then that was all you needed. That wasn't what they were paying for. Um they wanted better than that. But to not be overbuilt, you had to supply 10.1. And so and that was actually, there was actually a Colorado grant that still had that requirement, and they tiered it out a little bit more and fleshed it out, but and like you could be partially not overbuilt if you had 25.3 and 10.1 or some silly bunch of rules. But yeah, the goalpost has moved recently in the last few years a couple times, and people have been not happy with that. It's like, well, requirements. I mean, even 5 years ago, would you have considered 10.1 broadband?
No,
No.
not me.
Yeah. I'd come from Fort Collins, and like where I'd got, I think it was Comcast up there. It was a couple hundred megs basic package, and I think there was, can't remember what it was upload, but it was reasonable. It was 4, 5, 10, something like that. Back then I didn't care as much. And it's like I come out and I'm like, 10.1? No. That's barely enough to, I mean, yeah, you can have a decent Netflix watching experience, but without decent QoS, you're gonna, first kid who turns on their Xbox and needs an update, it's gonna kill that. And admittedly, nowadays Xbox and Steam can kill anything. I've seen gigabit get trashed by Steam downloads.
Because a lot of games they're not doing chunks of patches. They're doing whole re-downloads and swaps on the file system. So it's like you're pulling 60, 120 gigs of game, depending, to just swap it out on the system, which is kind of insane.
So before I knew better, it was like right after I started working at my old place, and I was like, hey, could I do a game update to my boss? And he's like, yeah, sure, just plug into this router here and you'll be good. And he didn't think about it at all, but that router was right on our edge, and where we had 2 gig bonded, and I plugged right into the router and started the Steam download. And so Steam had a cache down in the data center that router was connected to, and our upstream provider was paired with them. And so I filled up a gig on a connection that was already pulling more than a gig. So
people don't understand that with their scale and the way that they're distributed in the data centers and how close they try to get to you to get the game download, they actually have multi-gigabit pipes, and if you've got one too, you could probably saturate your link.
I did. I killed. Well, I didn't kill our internet connectivity, but there was some definite slowdown for like 5 minutes before I was like, oh no, I need to slow this down. I panicked. But I was like, oh. So yeah, and you can trash a gig easy as long as your upstream has as long as there's bandwidth in the upstream in between you and wherever. But like that's the idea is, well, okay, sure, maybe I can get through. I'll be maxing whatever I can get from Joe Schmo's download service, whatever, at 100 megs, but now I still have 900 megs left for everything else. So at least the general thought, I think, is what people are thinking, what they're trying to go for, but I don't know. So yeah, BEAD service, it's going to be an interesting show. I think WISP has been talking about maybe trying to get something changes in that and see if that can be changed. I don't know. I'm not particularly hopeful about it. But then again, I'm kind of okay with my tax dollars not going to unlicensed wireless. Like,
There's another big factor here too is, so they're getting all this money, and they're allocating it to build out these broadband networks. And traditionally, aside from like the Form 477, there hasn't been like a real way for the FCC to actually audit that you are delivering what you say you're delivering. And so when the FCC starts to be a little more strict on that data collection, and they want to know where your CPEs are, where your APs are, your transmit powers, all of that stuff. And because they want to show taxpayers and they want to show political figures that like we're on the right track to deliver broadband. And so not only are the requirements changing, but the requirement for WISPs to collect that extra data like the cellular carriers do, it's not going to be good for the WISP industry for a lot of players out there, because once they see, the negligence around ignoring EARP and where customers are, and it wouldn't take too much data processing to see like, oh, there's no way this WISP with this data can deliver 100 symmetrical. And so, they took funding, and now there's going to be issues there. And so it's kind of like getting squeezed from both sides with the requirements changing, and then the FCC looking at collecting more information to verify that you're actually delivering what you say you're delivering. Because out in WISP land, a lot of people turn off that EARP limit, get distances they're not supposed to be, and they also introduce a bunch of noise in their network they can't mitigate because they're too far out. And so those things are going to be probably penalized at some point once the FCC figures out how to actually process that data. I mean, they're already developing tooling for submitting this stuff. Like they've got their web infrastructure to log in and upload your forms, and they're doing some level of processing today. But as these initiatives come out and you've got multi-billion-dollar funding rounds for building these networks out, I guarantee you they're going to step up their data ingestion and analytics to really try to understand like how much of the country is underserved. And it's probably going to make the industry look significantly worse when they have that data. So I hope people kind of take that into consideration as far as how they're going to start building going forward.
Yeah, that makes me wonder. So like over in Australia, I think they've implemented some mechanism where you have to be able to test and like actually deliver reports.
Speed tests.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's something that they should have to do in association with this funding? Like if you're going to get funding, you have to have, maybe, I don't know, off of every tower at least, like some testing node that automatically reports back or something?
So Universal Service Fund, USAC, has been running ACAM, alternative costs, something, 1 and 2, and I think there's going to be a 3-1, and then there's RDOF and CAF 1 and 2, and I think there's going to be a CAF 3 as well. So all the later ones, ACAM 1, 2, RDOF, and CAF 2 and 3, is, by my understanding, all of them have required a new broadband measurement system. I can't remember the name of the FCC for the document where they discussed and like hard set everything down. But that is run by USAC now and is the Universal Service Administration. Their performance measure testing for measuring, are you actually delivering what we're paying you to? Actually, why am I trying to pull this stuff out of my memory? It's all on here. So rural broadband experiments, RBE, CAF broadband loop support, CAF PLS, ACAM 2, the CAF auction and stuff. So yeah, all these. Also, BEAD will be, from the looks of it, it's following the same speed and latency requirements, which or at least speed testing measurements. So you have to do testing at certain times, particularly during peak time. So that's between 6 and 6 and midnight. You have to do these testing. You have, from the looks of it, you also have network outages that you're allowed to have. There's only so much time in the year that you're able to have. Your latency is tested, and you have to hit these percentages and numbers across all these things, which I am so thankful latency is being required as a like portion of that. Now, yeah, does it screw over the guys getting money from Alaska? And there has to be lots and lots of exceptions for the Alaska guys. Yes, but like I don't think the traditional satellite providers should get money for delivering internet to somewhere where you can't do a Skype call over your technology. And also like just in general, the guys who are like pulling these stupid random systems of like, oh well, we're just gonna nat. Like I've heard guys bragging about having 5 or 6 layers of nat, and it's
Ugh.
like the latency going through that they are introducing there, and then like on top of point to multi-point, on top of however long it takes to get back. That's not broadband. Yeah, yeah, sure. You can speed test reasonably okay sometimes, but that's insane. And like, and that they're forcing people to test during peak usage. So that means that they have to overbuild, which means in 5 years, when they get a few more customers than they were initially built it for, you're still going to have a good experience. So I think it's yeah, call them out, burn them at the stake, make them give you your money back if they are not providing, if they're building a network that doesn't meet what you're paying for. Like there's been too many of these government funding where there was no way to figure out if they are actually providing, other than people complaining or not complaining.
That's why I think they're focusing on the data collection, especially for funding, because like that speed test mechanism is really heavily skewed towards wireline, because in the wireless industry, like it's surprising how many people don't understand, what a half duplex and a full duplex wireless link is. So like, for example, Mimosa, I don't think they have any full duplex point to point. It's all kind of like a hybrid, like dynamic adjustment thing. It's not like an actual full duplex link.
The B24, I know.
Okay, so one product.
Yeah.
So that's hard when you build out a all wireless backbone. You can't just hammer speed tests like that, because you've got a wireless system. It's TDMA. So, the wireline, if you've got fiber, you can just upgrade your optics on your backhaul. So like you've got excess capacity for the cost of some modules, maybe some higher end fiber components. But for the wireless side, that's really difficult to, one thing like speed testing from the customer during peak time, or even just testing from the POP. That's pretty hard on the network with our current technology. So I think that's another thing that's more skewed towards wireline, but it's probably also to try to prevent some funding for things like Starlink, which they know is going to be some competition. I think there's kind of a fight going on between the satellite providers and the wireline providers. And so the WISPs usually just get the worst end of all that stuff. So it's like,
yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Yeah. And, oh yeah. And like, so that's the other cool part of the RDOF is you have to do it from the customer's premises to certified data centers. Like it has to be in Denver. It has to be in like Houston or somewhere. I can't remember.
Over the internet, not just inside your network, right?
Yeah. It has to be out, and so that it's testing multiple aspects of connectivity. Which
like who your upstream is, like who you're paying to get that bandwidth. Are you getting the cheapest thing? Are you in an IX? Like,
yeah. Are you super oversaturated and everything goes to pot? Yeah.
Yeah. Who
are you on a
cares?
Comcast business service when you're not supposed to be? See, that's more times than I should have.
I that said, like that's a cheap way to get bandwidth right off the bat. Like I get it. I get guys doing that and rocking it. Like it gets you rolling, and it gets you a couple guys, and maybe it's really. And honestly, last year I was buying upstream connectivity from Hurricane Electric. That cost me more than 10 grand over the year. Like that's a lot of money for somebody just starting out. Like
for
I get
bandwidth
it.
and transport, or just bandwidth?
Just bandwidth. It was a 10 gig connection, and
Oh,
oh
that's not a good price.
yeah, no, I was having to pay somebody else for
Oh,
the transport. So
okay.
yeah, it was a pain. It hurt a lot, but it worked out because somebody else was paying me for it. So
Yeah, you can say sometimes if you don't have options, then
yeah,
you do
yeah,
what you
you're
got to
stuck.
do. Yeah.
But
Something you were talking about, you mentioned satellite stuff, and I don't remember where the graphic was, but I saw like Viasat and HughesNet. Those guys are multi-billion-dollar
Yes.
companies. Like I didn't realize, but if you look up kind of their marketing numbers, I think HughesNet says they have over 1 million U.S. customers, and Viasat owes over like 500,000 U.S.
Even
customers.
before SpaceX,
Wild.
if you just think about the cost of getting a satellite into orbit, like they've got to have money. They've got to have customers to like get that stuff up there in the first place. And I don't think people think too hard about them because the service sucks. Latency is high. It's not that good, but they're still getting funding. So
Yeah.
I mean, I get
Service
that needs
is
to be
terrible,
solved.
but honestly, it's better than nothing. So
yeah,
I guess that's the boat that most people fall in that are using it, because it is god awful. But
well, and what's sad is like a lot of that, like it's got awful just because there's so many people on it. Like, and you only can put so many satellites up, and you have to recoup those costs. And your investors want some extra money too, so got to pay off the bank. So it's really really hard. Like the technology. John Osmond. If you're ever in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the dude is so cool and has like there's all sorts of crazy networking stuff down that way. And he was showing me some of the cool stuff that it was Dish's stuff, I think. Like they built some amazing technology, and what they're doing to be able to get literally you can anywhere in the United States, as long as you can see the southern sky, like you can get connectivity. Like that's mind blowing in my mind. Like that you can do that and pull that off. That's so cool. Um, and that they're able to do that on top of delivering hundreds and thousands of TV channels too. Like, wow. It is really cool technology. It's
The
just
TV's easier because it's unidirectional, but
yeah.
I think one thing that they should look at is make it so if you don't meet X requirements, you can't sell a contracted service. Because I think that would drive because like the hardest part about for companies like Comcast is losing a customer is extremely expensive. Like getting a new customer, I mean, it's pretty cheap, but like losing a long-term customer to someone like Starlink, even if it's not a better service, like most people like to try stuff out when there's a new thing in your area and you've had the same provider for like 10 years, like people are going to churn and that costs them a lot of money. And so, they've got contracts as well, like 2-year plus contracts for some of these like satellite providers. So if they approached it from that standpoint of like, if you don't meet these requirements for latency and speed, like you can't sell a service under contract, to push them to innovate, because that's the problem, right? Is they've got you on the hook for 2 years. So like they don't have to do anything. And these companies, if you try to get out of your contract, they just bill you for the duration and hit your bank account. So like if you take that off the table, they have no choice but to innovate on the technology. Versus
because
these
a lot
weird
of their
100 by 100 for
you're
everyone.
right. A lot of their valuation comes in like, hey, look, we have these contracts, so this is a guaranteed amount of money. So investors say, oh, well, we know it's going to get X, Y, Z. And, or even if you have a business and you want to sell it, if you could say, look, I've got these contracts, you're guaranteed this amount, as opposed to everything's month to month, right? I think it's a little bit sketchier. So that's an interesting concept. It never occurred to me.
That's an operational thing. It has nothing to do with sending billions and billions of dollars out. Like if you put that pressure, like for the WISP, that's like the worst day when you hear a customer just switch to Frontier and now they're going to be in there for 2 years. They will come back, but that's 2 years of revenue. Like, you're just going to have to eat it. But if that was off the table, it would help the WISP industry but it would also push the bigger guys to innovate on their technology and actually spend dollars to fix it because, instead of relying on this funding that they're finding ways to work around and doing the bare minimum and then, using the rest of that as like income,
The one thing
forced competition.
yeah, the one thing I would say for that is like I've worked on a couple grants, and neither one of the grants that we were going after, when we were boiling them out, one of them we broke even after 3 years on per customer. If we got 80% take rate, which I thought was optimistic. Yeah, 80% take rate with fiber into someplace that has nothing. I was like, well, yeah, maybe. It's just, yeah, I didn't think so. So, and then also another one was we didn't break even till like 5 years, and that was with half the people already there promising that they would take our service if we built out. And so we were assuming pretty high take rate there. I think they went for like 90, just because it's like, well, you got a lot of people promising, and a lot of people just don't have anything because they aren't in a contract. So there was a pretty good, and that was after 5 years. So in any of the contracts that anyone was in, they were going to be able to get out of eventually. And they like assumed that there would be a staggering of the customers. But even then, after 5 years, like that's a long time to not have contracts. Now, admittedly, the last place we technically had a contract, but we never held anyone to it. Just because like if you're that annoyed with us, we don't want to be interacting with you. So bye, have a nice day. Like, and somebody moving, like, am I going to try to hunt you down and get money out of you if you're moving out? It just wasn't worth it to us to get that, bad blood. We just asked the people, like, please recommend us to the next people. It's fine. We won't hold you to the contract. So usually that worked out really well. It's free, cheap advertising. But yeah, so I guess my point is that not having contracts, that's really, really hard. But I guess with federal funding, hey, if they're going to cover 50-60% of the bill for this build out, yeah.
And at the end of the day, local support is always going to win against the big guys.
Yeah.
Unless you're just really bad. But when hardware is available, it's going to be more economically feasible to build out wireless and then underbuild fiber as you have a take rate in a small community. And so like that gives you a competitive advantage as the small guy, but then also pushes the big guys to innovate on technology. Like if even like the old CMTS systems you can get online, or the 1U pizza box CMTS units and stuff, that all came from innovation on these bigger companies. Or if you look at like GPON or XGS-PON and the evolution of these fiber technologies, it's because they're running into some issues. And so I'm saying like everyone wins. That technology eventually trickles to like the WISP manufacturers. Like they're kind of taking stuff that other people have, fit the bill to innovate on chipsets, and then they're using them now for our benefit. And so if you light a fire a little bit under people, like the bigger guys, everyone's going to win at the end of the day. Like they've got, some of these companies have countrywide presence. So like your little operation in one state in an area isn't going to kill their business. So like there's enough bodies in the US that need broadband that like it's going to be okay. But I think that's the easiest thing to at least start with, would be something like that, versus letting these companies with an entire legal team swallow up a ton of funding, deliver the bare minimum, and pocket the rest. Basically, that's kind of unfair.
Yeah, hasn't New York been dealing with? It was CenturyLink I wanted to say, but maybe it was somebody else. Like was supposed to deliver, and New York keeps saying they aren't delivering, and the company's like, well, but blah, 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 blah. So, yeah,
look at the requirements. Here's our bare minimum proof that we meet that. Stakeholders are happy. We did what we said we would do, but no more.
Here's our team
Yeah.
of lawyers to deliver our results of our testing that show as it meets requirements.
So, well, but speaking of testing and meeting requirements, let's see. I think we have some little reports from. Oh, geez, that's why this is so difficult. Is I'm looking at the wrong page. The Magic SFP notes. I think. I think Greg, you put that in there.
Yeah. We really just need to have like an all Chad power hour at some point, because Chad Walks is like the tester extraordinaire. He did all of that. What was all that testing he did just recently? It was in the Terragraph space, right? Like
Yeah.
him and some other guys. Man, definitely need to get him on. But Chad was he introduced the idea of the Magic SFP thing, right? Like that SFP that goes straight into kind of a coax. It's like a Mocha system or whatever. And he did a bunch of testing on it. And the highlights, I believe, were that you had to force an interface to 1 gig to make it work. And it does not work in MikroTik SFP Plus ports. So if you're trying to use MikroTik stuff, you can't shove into an SFP Plus. Said the manufacturer's aware of that. They say Cisco, Ruckus, Aruba, HP stuff has all been tested, working well with SFP Plus ports, but the MikroTiks, for whatever reason, I'm not sure. It sounds like a hardware thing maybe, isn't working. He was talking about the frequencies they use are 400 to 1650, which usually overlaps with a cable TV system. So you're probably going to have a bad time if there is current cable stuff running on there. He said he was able to pass just under 1 gig of traffic, which is pretty good once you get it to work. What else did he say? He said it seemed to be temperamental on the HAP ACs, using those as client devices, using like stable Router OS version 6 firmware. He said sometimes you couldn't get like a DHCP address through it. You'd have to like reboot, and eventually he would, like get it to work. So in his opinion on like the MikroTik stuff, like if you're mostly a MikroTik shop, it's not ready for prime time. I guess if you're running Cisco stuff, maybe, but like, I don't know. Are people running? I don't know, because there's got to be some, I'm willing to bet there's some manufacturer stuff that's got kind of like a little SFP, maybe kind of like a fiber to the home setup that you could slap this thing into and it would work. Obviously he hasn't done exhaustive testing in here, so it's probably somewhere in there. I think he was trying combination of DAC cables, all kinds of stuff, and just having really mixed results, trying to get it to work on the MikroTik stuff. So it's a really cool idea. I just don't necessarily know that it's ready for use in that space. Interesting, but not quite ready on the MikroTik kit. And again, I don't want to blame anybody. Like, I don't want to blame MikroTik or the Magic SFP guys. Like, I don't honestly know, and he's not 100% sure either, kind of where the issue lies in there. But if they could settle that down, it seems like it would probably work okay.
Yeah, I think it could be a really, really cool solution in some places where you can just throw this in, throw a wireless access point on top of it, plug this into a wireless access point, coax cable that spits out of a wall, your access point mounts right there, boom, done. And you've got the connectivity. Now, admittedly, you have to figure out some way to power that access point, but that's another problem for another day. But it gets you connectivity through coax, which is really, really, really prolific. Like, I think, Nick, you just mentioned how there's a lot of dead cable plant out there. And there's a ton of it in like multiple dwelling units all over the place. So like
that's where it's going to be the biggest is, that's where like that, what's that other stuff called? There's the whole branch of products for old phone line, just any old cat cable, to like get gigabit speeds over it. It's probably
Mocha.
because they don't want to rewire the whole building. So you get
isn't that Mocha?
Well,
MOCA or whatever.
I know Mocha is a technology, but there's some WISP vendors that have product they were selling. I can't remember what it's
Like
called.
some G dot something or other.
Yeah,
G
that
dot
stuff.
H. Yeah.
So there's a lot of that stuff because retrofitting an apartment complex is quite expensive. Having to
Oh, yeah.
rerun all of the cable. I mean, Greg probably knows something about that.
Oh, especially if
But-
it's like multi-story, like it's
Yeah.
virtually impossible. It's so cost prohibitive, and you have to mess with the exterior of the building. It's a nightmare. So yeah, if there was an abandoned cable plant, even like if these little SFPs were $100 and then you're throwing your own CP in there, that's still way cheaper and way faster than retrofitting. If it's reliable, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's the other caveat. Like if it works reliably, it's a nice solution, especially if you could theoretically get, close to gig speed. Of course, if you're, aggregating like 7 or 8 users into a single one of these SFPs on the other side, well, they all get to share that 1 gig connection. But it's like most technologies, like even GPON or whatever, is over subscription. So you just kind of figure out what ratio works and make it function in your environment. I could see that being a pretty cool option.
Yep. So the IgniteNet is what I think. Yeah. G.HN is the is what they support at least. So, but yeah, no, reutilizing existing infrastructure, because otherwise it's like just pull new cable. I think, wasn't it Chad was also mentioning a bunch of issues trying to get we were going around, how do you get pulled cable through a building, 1-inch conduit, with existing fiber in there, and it's like,
You probably don't.
Yeah, because like if you've got conduit that's already got fiber in there, and theoretically, even if you have a pull string, odds are that pull string some point in that run got wrapped around the fiber, and so you take your chances, man. Like I don't know.
That's an expensive mistake potentially. Unless I think Jeremy Austin was like, if you're gonna do that, you might as well pull a couple strands. So when it breaks, just get ready to resplice, because that's not a lot of
when
room.
it breaks. Yeah.
no, it's just like, God, that's so tiny. 1 inch is just, God, you think it's, oh man, miles and miles of space when I'm talking in millimeters, but nope, not really. So yeah, I honestly, my first suggestion to him was, well, cut the fiber and mux it. But it wasn't his. It's not his fiber.
That's probably a similar problem to the apartment buildings. Like they don't think when they're installing the stuff like years ago, like what it's going to be. So it's not like they have demarc points in every floor that have like a nice place to like connect switches. Sometimes it's like there's the least amount of breaks that they can make, or they use the smallest pipe that they can fit because they don't want it to take up too much space. And it's never about like, what am I going to do in the future when there's some kind of growth, or I need to retrofit the network. I mean, a lot of apartment complexes are having issues with, wireless interference and internet delivery. And so if your internet sucks and there's too much noise in your building, you're going to have tenants leave, and that's really costly. So it's now a thought, but what do you do with all these buildings that wasn't a thought, and you've got all this copper line that you don't have easy access to most of the run? That's a pretty big problem.
Yeah. Well, and then like, just to your example, I was in an apartment a couple weeks ago where they ran pipe that all the way up to the apartments and such, but the trouble is there was phone, coax, and it was coax. What was the other thing in there already? Like there's existing stuff in it, multiple existing stuff in a 2-inch pipe, and it's like, well, that's going to be a pain. So yeah, it was not a fun pull. It went pretty smooth, but it's not a fun pull to do, because it's like, don't break the other stuff. Thank goodness my fiber was the last one in there. No one else is getting in there now. Capped it. I filled it with foam.
You put epoxy in there. Gotcha.
I know there was traditionally a lot of like one use systems and like special CPEs for systems like this, but now they're getting into trying to pack it all down into the module. So they're running a small operating system on there. They're trying to do as much of the media conversion stuff in a stick. So you're kind of presenting, an IP sort of communication or Ethernet communication.
Mm-hmm.
but most of these things run pretty hot. So I'm curious. Usually they have big heat sinks on them because you're housing some pretty complex electronics, and especially if it's in a not temperature controlled environment.
Yeah.
I could imagine these things if you
Yeah.
kind of like pack it in a box. Some apartments they have like something recessed in the wall that packs the modem and everything in there, and I wonder how, the Magic SFP, or there's a lot of PON modules now that are all on the stick, so you can just kind of pop it into whatever network equipment you want, and they can do all the management from the module. But they're pretty bulky and they're pretty warm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking too, most of the, even like in an MDU like environment, if they can give you a space to mount your stuff, it's usually not climate controlled. So it's going to be hot as hell. You've got a bunch of these modules aggregating into one switch that's, stacked with these jokers. Man,
Oh man,
you're probably going to have a bad time, or at least unpredictable time. You might be all right in the winter, but come summertime, at least in my neck of the woods, it's going to get hairy. Yeah.
some unexpected costs for temperature control.
And I hate putting, because I've had nothing but trouble with it, like in MDUs putting air conditioning in, because inevitably those things are going to fail. Even if they don't fail and they're still working, they'll start getting loud, and the maintenance people will start yelling at you because the tenants are yelling at them. And I've had one where we had a window unit in one of the things, and the window unit broke in such a way that it was just dumping like all of the heat into
I've had that happen before.
into the IDF. It's like, oh my God, so it's just, if it's
Start
not
getting
one thing,
alerts,
the other.
high
Yeah.
temperature threshold alerts. Oh crap!
Yeah, everyththing's like melting, and then like the paint's coming off your chassis. You can't figure out why. Yeah, so I hate putting air conditioning in if absolutely required, and it makes the deal happen. Okay, but man, that's just like one set of headaches that I just do not want to deal with.
You can't always guarantee breaker availability. So sometimes, you put in a new air conditioning unit or a mini split or something, and there's some shoddy wiring that happened in the past, breakers trip, and now you've got no cooling. Nobody tells you, nobody goes in there. Just all kinds of mess.
Or two, like what happens when the power blips and for whatever reason the air conditioning decides not to come back on.
Yeah.
When you have to
Like
go out
cheap
there
air-
and poke
window
a button.
units.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's always a pain in the butt. It's never just easy and straightforward.
No, never easy at all. And similarly never easy is RadOS updates.
Depends.
Yeah, well, and Harry, we lost Cake for your simple queues, ladies and gentlemen, in the latest ROS version 7.3 beta 40. I know I had been testing with it and playing with it for a while. I hadn't seen anything, but to be honest, I didn't use Cake nearly as much as I was using FQCodal, just because Cake was a lot more memory intensive, and I had more CPU processing available to me with my 1009s than I had with the memory usage, because I never had a router crash on me, but I did see a progression in memory usage over like the course of weeks. I would see some, and so it looked like there might be
Little bit of a
some
leak.
memory, might have been, but I couldn't like verify that it was Cake specifically or some settings in my Cake, because sometimes it wouldn't be there, and it's like, well, yeah, she's. So I don't know exactly what MikroTik was talking about. Oli in the Slack group was saying that there's some bugs in MikroTik's version of their kernel, which is old and out of date already. That's what everyone's complaining about. And there's a different. They're saying that Libre QoS, so they are a open source QoS provider. So they implement Cake and FQCodal in Linux, so in a way that you can pull it and push it in your ISP network. So they're similar to offerings like Preseam or Sise. There's definitely, stuff that Preseam offers that you aren't going to get with these guys. But if you're just needing a basic system to get going, they do say that an x86 device can put around 4 gigs per CPU core. So at least that's what they're advertising. So since they're not making a lot of money off of their advertising, you might give them a run. But they do say that, and they're like, why don't we just use in RouterOS v7? And that there's some bugs there. Maybe that's something that MikroTik is recognizing is queuing is not well supported at this time with those technologies. And also, Cake isn't really well designed for hierarchical token buckets systems, which is what simple queues is in MikroTik, meaning that you have amounts of bursting that can be applied to a certain bandwidth flow depending on where that flow, how much bandwidth has been used recently, how much bandwidth has been used recently by other flows, and what has been allocated, basically, as in extremely. So Cake isn't designed for that. And so definitely, I know I struggled with getting it, implementing it, and making it work right, because there were several times wherein, like, if with incorrect settings, I could just straight up crash a router, like turn it on, crash, and we just go into crash loop. So it's like, God dang it. So yeah, it definitely was something buggy there, but I was attributed it to me using insane settings. So maybe MikroTik is like, maybe not. So
Yeah, because I think Cake and Codal are more like, they want lower level interface access. And that philosophy is like, we don't care if stuff gets dropped. Like, you don't need to queue a whole lot as long as the right stuff is getting priority, because the other stuff can recover, and doing latency measuring instead of trying to like fill up your RAM with a buffer of stuff that needs to eventually go out. It's like, no, let's let some stuff drop. We'll make sure that the low latency stuff's prioritized. And it's a weird situation for MikroTik right now, because it's getting a point where people don't really want to buy the V7 only hardware. And so, like, even if there wasn't a chip shortage, they would probably have an impact on their sales, because people are really apprehensive right now about version 7. And so the more products that they're releasing that are V7 only are probably not going to fly off the shelf other than for people's labs. So they're in a weird situation right now where they're trying to fix all of the routing implementation stuff and the service provider level stuff, everything on the MPLS side, IPv6. But then you've got, like, Cake and Codal thing. Now they're reverting that. They had Docker support for a while and they took that away for a while. So it's like a whole bunch of other stuff aside from the carrier grade routing end of things that need to also be addressed. And so they have to, like, get over the one hurdle to free up resources to fix the other stuff. And so they're kind of in a weird spot right now.
yeah,
It's unfortunate, but I get it. It's complex.
well, and I don't, I get, like, some level of, like, yeah, let's just get everyone on V7, because then if we're all on V7, we don't have to support V6 so much anymore. But it's gonna be a decade. Well, okay, maybe not. 5 years. Yeah,
They've
5 years.
got a lot of resources.
Yeah,
So
3 to 5 years probably before you really get the vast majority of people. Vast. But you're still going to be finding V6 stuff 20 years from now. Guarantee you that.
I hope not.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
All right, there's going to be some consultant who's a young guy right now and is bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. He's going to find V6 stuff, guarantee you. In at least 10 years. And so, but, like, I get them wanting to push V7, but I feel like, other than for basic home users, definitely, and then crazy people like me and you. um, maybe some more people now. It's definitely looking to be a lot more stable. And I've interacted with a couple guys who aren't like, oh, I love MikroTik up and down the street. I play with it all the time. I dream MikroTik stuff in my sleep. Insane. So like I've interacted with a couple of those guys who are like normal-ish, more normal, and they're able to get things working, and get BGP and some other stuff up and running. So I feel like there's definitely more stability, but I don't know why MikroTik is pushing it so hard. Like,
I think they thought it was going to be further along than it was by now, and they invested so much money in new chipsets and hardware that aren't going to run V6. And so I think they want to get product shipped, and they probably thought they were going to be there. But if anyone who's ever written software, I mean, imagine having to write an operating system for a network that operates in like the nanosecond realm, and protocols and RFCs, and just how many edge cases there are out there. Like rewriting an entire routing stack. I mean, they've been doing it for years, but I think they thought they would have been further along and more stable. But there's a lot of really specific edge cases, especially around the service provider protocol stack, that there's bugs like showstoppers that people like they can't put it in production right now. And maybe they didn't anticipate that, but now they've got all this hardware coming down, the 100 gig stuff, these new switch chips that are only going to run V7. And so now they're kind of like, in limbo a little bit, which is unfortunate. But
yeah, it makes me wonder, like, obviously this has been the plan for a long time, right? It's like to transition to version 7. And so you have, like you were talking about, this hardware that's only going to support version 7 because of, the new Linux kernel and all that stuff and the advancements and the more easy to do stuff. And then I wonder if, everything was in alignment, we were moving forward, and then COVID hit and it like derailed the software portion of it, maybe slowed them down. Maybe that's kind of where the mismatch happened on some of this. Like I gotta think that they had forecasted probably pretty well to have this stuff move in line. Something probably jammed them up, huh?
Yeah,
it would seem that way.
Yeah.
I think COVID killed everyone.
Yeah. So,
but there's also a lot of noise.
Give them a little grace.
I mean, you look at the forum, you look at Facebook. Most of these people, they're not Wiresharking, they're not PCAPing. They don't understand how the protocols actually work. They just know my implementation that worked on V6 doesn't work on V7.
Yeah,
it's like the OSPF thing. It's like, they're using broadcast or NBMA, and like they're not going to link up together, even though they should have been configured in a point-to-point mode. They don't understand how, delegation happens, like especially on MPLS, LDP, all these bigger protocols, people who had consultants help them implement it on V6. Well, it doesn't necessarily interop, or there's a bug, and it's like, well, they just don't really know how the protocol works, and they don't know how to PCAP it in a way that is impactful to MikroTik support. Yeah. So they just get all this noise and junk. So I can't even imagine trying to sift through that when it's like, this thing broken. It's like, well, can you send me a PCAP so we can see like, what information is wrong, like where it's broken? They probably don't have a lot of that, which is why, I always, just out of curiosity, companies I follow, I like to look at their job postings. And like MikroTik they're still trying to hire, I think, some QA people with specific routing experience. And they're still hiring like developers and stuff. They want like QA people to test the actual software in the lab, like dedicated to that. So, I mean, I think they know what they're doing. It's just, there's a lot of issues and a lot of noise to try to figure out how to get to the finish line faster so they can start backtracking and, bringing Docker back in. Because I guess they had to rewrite parts of that, bringing these queuing types back in, and more of the, like, I guess you could say enterprisey or like small business type features versus the actual ISP stuff, the routing stack. So, I mean, that's tough.
Yeah. You're just
for sure.
Yeah, I don't envy them at all in the least, and it's just like, golly, Ned. But they ain't, well, they're in their bed, and
But they're like on the cusp
it's
of
so
breaking the
cool.
industry with their port density and the software functionality. And if they start branching out into, if they go overhaul the wireless and bring that into like new hardware, like it's going to bring a lot of benefit to the consumer for sure.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Like even yeah, if you could do just what they can do, like, and they just have the coolest weird things, like that PCIe router 2004. Like that is the coolest
That's the
thing.
thing.
Yeah. I whoever thought of it? I love
Router
you.
and a card.
Yeah. That's going to be part of my next computer build, is just throw that in there, because, well, now I have a router on my computer. I don't have to have a lab router sitting on top of it all the time.
You got to go
So-
crazy and get like a PCI lane breakout board and just build a chassis and just slot them in and have like this big like route cluster in a rack server with some kind of like Ryzen or Threadripper like high PCI lane bandwidth CPU.
I'll have to go to the boss man and be like, hey, you know what I need?
Got a solution looking for a problem, sounds like.
Is
Just
it
'cause.
that bad of a solution though?
It would be cool.
It would be epic. Well, let's see. Was there anything else big that you guys saw over this last week? I guess we quick testing over backup link, but I think we can do that really quick. Just using NetWatch and pinging, and then making certain. Then you mentioned also is black holing that route. Somebody was having to run a link. Where was that in the Slack group, Greg? Do you remember?
I think it was in the. Was that in networking? Maybe in networking. Might have been in MikroTik. It was probably. I'm willing to bet it was a Chad thing. He's always doing the wacky wild stuff.
Yep. So he's running connectivity over PepLink, private IP, no IPv6, and he doesn't have the ability to do outbound VPN to anything other than PepLink, so he can't VPN to his own network. And so I just suggested do a /32 route out that Pepe link, so that when the Pepe link, so what he was running into was the Pepe link would lock up, and then if his main connection went down, the secondary connection, which was the Pep link, wouldn't be up and providing secondary connectivity. And so he discovered this most recently, and now in a snowstorm in Colorado, fun fact, we are having them right now. He does have a 1009. I suggested just do a /32 static route out the secondary connection, point at that, and then have NetWatch ping that, and then do your notification, send you an email notification or whatever you needed to get it. And then Mike or Greg, wow, my goodness. One of those people. You just said add a black hole route for that same address. So
I did the same thing as you, Tommy, except I usually add a black hole route, just with a higher precedence. That way, if for whatever reason that interface goes down, because like if the interface goes down that it's pointing the next hop to, it'll invalidate that route you had, and so then it'll just go out your normal internet and it'll be like, oh, everything's fine, and you won't realize that WAN link's down. But if you add that extra little black hole route, that if for whatever reason that primary route you have in there for that /32 becomes invalid, well, then it just goes in the trash. And so I learned that one the hard way. Yeah.
See, I would never have learned that, because I'm a horrible, horrible person, and I throw all my interfaces into bridges. So, they never go down my route.
You're just an animal. You're not a bad person. Oh my gosh! Speaking of bridges, that made me think about I saw on that beta 40, I know we're backtracking a little bit, but they added some more verbosity on bridge loop detection stuff. And I was thinking I would really love if Microtik happened to be listening to this and they wanted to add some more logging stuff on spanning tree incidents. I would love to see that hit the log because there's a distinct lack of clarity on when spanning tree things happen inside the Microtik. So I'm just going to put that out there. Please add some of that. That would help.
Yep. Logging. I love logging. We need more logging. Always more logging. Nick, anything else you were wanting to bring up, drag us through?
Nothing really.
Well, as Greg says, let's stick a fork in it. Greg, how do people find you anymore?
Oh man, I have a blog, gregsoul.com. You can contact me at greg@gregsoul.com as well. But on my blog, I very regularly blog now about automation stuff. So I do a lot of that. And I think I'm going to be joined fairly quickly by Nick on blogging about automation stuff as well.
Yeah.
So, well, where do we find your blogs about automation there, Nick?
I have a website. It's ario.cloud. It's really short. It's a lot easier than using my last name. So I'm going to start blogging more. I have one article so far, specifically something on Ansible, but I'm probably going to be posting more stuff about NetXMS, monitoring, Linux stuff, Linux firewalls, all kinds of different random things. Eventually it's going to be like searchable because I'm going to use it myself to like look back at things that I constantly forget that I want to document on here. So I'm probably going to be regularly posting on there. No. Well, I mean, eventually, but
Nick finds himself with all this spare time now, right? You're just learning to be a sales guy. Is that all you do all day long?
Yeah, basically. But like, Googling things usually gets you like the entry point, but there's always more nuance. There's more actual security things. You can't just copy what's on the internet. Like you got to firewall your services. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes into deploying a service or installing a piece of software. And so I think it's important to kind of have the full story documented for me to look at instead of re-Googling 2 years later, just, follow through. So.
Yeah, I just find my own articles in my site by Googling like site Lost Creek Tech. And that's how I find everything on my own website. Why reinvent the wheel? Google's got it perfectly done.
Yeah.
If they index it, yeah.
Yeah, I do the exact same thing.
So yeah. If you're just wanting to find anything in particular, just do whatever your search term is, and then site : lostcreek.tech, and you're gonna find anything you ever wanted to know about anything. Honestly, people, that's my website. If you want to reach out to me, I'm Tommy at lostcreek.tech. You can shoot me an email. There's plenty of contact forms on the website too. I love talking about Cake and FQCodal, and I need to be updating my BGP config because Microtik has changed it just slightly since the earlier RCs when I was playing with it. So, but yeah, feel free to reach out to us. You can also find all three of us on the Brothers WISP Patreon Slack group. We are all there a lot of the time, answering questions. Lots of guys there. Even though we're losing such an amazing guy in Greg, we have a bunch of new people who are really helping and contributing. And the old guard may be gone, but we have new guard as well. So continually reinventing the wheel, as it were, in ever more unique and better ways. So, all right, well, it's been a pleasure having you, Greg, and farewell, ye good soldier.
All right, gone but not forgotten.
Correct. All right, well, have a wonderful day. Take care, guys.
Bye, everybody.